does the career path of a Hollywood screenwriter usually work?
I feel like there's as many pathways to being a screenwriter as there probably are ways to grow up. There are some people, because again, there's no apprenticeship that you can really do. The way I think you learn screenwriting is you start writing screenplays. And the way you start making your way in the business is you start having meetings and you start working with people and you start kind of trying to find the right people. So I feel like when I went to film school, I learned everything there was about how to make movies, how to write scripts, how to shoot them, how to edit them. I learned very little about how the business actually works. How do you take a meeting? What should your resume look like? What do you talk about in a meeting? What's your brand? All that stuff I learned on my own. So now when I teach at New York Film Academy, I try to teach that stuff as well, because I think it's at least 50% of working in the film business. So I think nowadays, and again, everyone's gonna have different experiences, but I think nowadays it's like most people tend to break in by they write something that somehow gets some attention. Either it's like you make a video and it goes online, or you win a contest or something like that, and you start to get attention from people. And then everyone has this moment that, I'm not inventing this term, but it's called the water bottle tour, where it's like you go around and you have all these general meetings with kind of all the companies. And this happened to me, so it took me a while to get here, because I graduated film school, and then it took me about 5 years of writing scripts. And again, I was working the whole time, didn't have a lot of time to write, so I gave myself the goal of every year, I'm gonna finish one screenplay and send it to the Nickel Fellowship, which is like the biggest, I would say, most prestigious screenwriting contest in the world. And so I did that for like 4 years, and nothing, I would just get rejected every year. And I started to think, maybe I'm not so good at this. And then the 4th year, I got a little handwritten note on the rejection letter that said my script had made it to the top 10%. And that was enough that I'm like, all right, I'll try again next year. And then the next year, I wrote a script and I submitted it. And that script was a quarterfinalist in the Nickel Fellowship, which is like the top 5%, maybe top 2.5%. And then that same script got into some contests, it got me the attention of some agents and managers, and I ended up signing with a manager who I then ended up working on a new script with over another couple of years. But it was like 5 years of just kind of grinding away and writing scripts and sending them in before I really had anything. And then I would say another 5 years after that of like working with my manager and sending stuff out before I had that one script that like went out wide. And I went on the water bottle tour. And so I met a bunch of people. One of the producers I ended up meeting, we just went in on a general meeting, and then during the conversation, we started pitching ideas back and forth, and I ended up like writing a script for that producer. So that really kind of got me my start. But again, that was different people. Like some people might write their first script and send that to a person, and they're like, I love this, and they send it to somebody, and then the movie gets made. My path has been much, much longer. And I think what really kicked my career off in a new direction was I actually wrote a book first. I had an idea, so I had an agent from this big script I had that kind of went out. I had an agent, I had a manager, and I was a couple years into having my agent and taking a bunch of meetings, and I'd done some stuff, but nothing had really been made yet. And I pitched my agent this idea for a screenplay. And it was a big adventure idea, kind of like the Goonies, but with magic. And my agent said, I love this idea, but no one's gonna buy it, because it's not based on anything. You need IP. And if you'd written a book, great, but you didn't write a book. You want to write a screenplay. And so I remember driving home, get me all upset, and I'm like, well, I'll just write a book then. But that took me several years to like transition from writing a screenplay to writing a book. But then that book ended up getting published. I found a publisher. I put some chapters online. The publisher called me up and said, who are you? What's this book about? Like, I love this idea. And so I ended up eventually signing with that publisher. The book got published, and then a couple years after the book got published, I was hired to adapt it as a TV pilot. So it eventually came full circle, but it was a very long process. And again, very specific to me and what I was able to do.
And you said something previously about, like figuring out what your brand is. Mm-hmm. Was that even a question 10 years ago?
No.
20 years ago? Okay.
No, I wish someone had told me that. Because again, I think another thing that made me take a long time was every time I'd write something, I would write a totally new genre. So I would write my very first script was like a horror movie, and then my very second script was like a ripoff of The Professional. It was like a drama about a hitman. And then my next thing was a rom-com. And so every time I'd send stuff to anybody I knew in the business, they'd be like, I don't get it. Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, a little bit of everything. That is the wrong answer. A little bit of everything. It wasn't until I really started to hone in on things that are kind of like, I like things that have magic, fantasy, sci-fi, things that have genre elements. I like things with fun adventures. I don't like things that are dark and bleak. Once I started narrowing in on that, then people suddenly, I think, started to understand, okay, this is what he's good at, this is what he likes doing, and that started kind of giving me more opportunities. So, we didn't call it branding. I remember I tell the story a lot, but I remember the first script I had that went to a lot of contests was a script called Moving Day. And it was like a romantic comedy. And I went to the Austin Film Festival and I met this other screenwriter who was a horror screenwriter, and they had sold a horror screenplay right out of undergrad. So they were like 21 years old and they had written many horror movies. And I said, how did you know at age 21 you were a horror person? And they said, that's easy. Anytime I would see anything in reality, I'd see an old lady changing her tire, I would say, wouldn't it be scary if ... And that really lit a light bulb over my head, because the way I approach things is, wouldn't it be funny if? Wouldn't it be exciting if? So we weren't talking about branding, but I think that's a great way to figure out your brand, is to ask yourself, what is the thing you keep asking yourself in life? What is the story you keep trying to tell yourself? That can help you figure out what kind of stories you want to tell.
Do you think most aspiring screenwriters understand what a screenwriting career actually is?
I think it's easier now to understand what it is to be a screenwriter. We have a lot of resources. When I was starting out, we didn't even have the internet. When I was starting, I remember reading Premiere Magazine and thinking this was telling you about the business. But it wasn't really until I took a film analysis class in college that I realized someone actually sits down and writes the words. So I think nowadays there are a lot of great resources. There's YouTube videos like this one. There's podcasts that talk about the real nuts and bolts of being a screenwriter. So the resources are definitely out there. I think the thing that surprises people once they're out of film school or they stop taking a class is that thing we talked about earlier, which is that you have to sit down and do it. And you have to finish a script, and it has to be great. It can't just be solid or good. It has to be great, because people are reading tons of things every day. And then you have to figure out how to get it out there to people. And contests are a great way of doing that. Making something is a great way of doing that, like doing your own podcast. Take your script and turn it into a podcast, like a 10-episode, 15-minute episode podcast. Make a little web series of it, with little action figures or something. That is also a great option of getting stuff out there. But the meeting thing it is kind of like, until you start doing it, you don't really understand how interesting that is to navigate. Like the difference between getting a job and keeping a job is a huge screenwriting skill set. And there have been things that I've gotten the job and realized this is not for me. I shouldn't have taken this job probably. And then I've gotten other ones where it hasn't worked out and you realize there's something happened there that it didn't quite fully gel. So it's tricky to navigate that for sure.
Right, because sometimes the idea of something sounds great, but then when you look at what it is hour by hour, it's not. And if you know that you can work alone, it's like I can work alone, I'm okay. But it's sometimes like a big office, I don't think that would work for me. Other people, the exact opposite.
Right.
So I think if you know that about yourself and say, I'm good doing this hour by hour, then you can plug in what you can do.
Yeah, like for me, I definitely feel now I would rather almost write a thing first, the whole thing, like finish a whole script on spec, and then try and get people say, this is what I want to say. Do you want to say that with me? Do you want to work on it with me? As opposed to maybe starting with just a kernel of an idea. That's just me personally. Because I think sometimes when you start with just a kernel of an idea, you can really get far afield from what it was you originally wanted to say. So that's why I think novels have been such a great thing for me personally, is because no matter what happens, I can tell the story I want to tell in a novel. It exists. That's how I wanted to say it. And then if someone wants to adapt that, if they want to work with me on adapting it, if they want to do it themselves, great. That will be a different thing. But the novel will always exist. So I really like that now. I would say almost every idea now that I start, I almost always think about, like, I'm going to do this as a novel first, with the idea that hopefully we can make it as a TV show or a film or something someday.
Do a lot of writers think that they're just going to have their idea out there, they're going to make it as a spec script, present it, and it'll get made, but they don't realize that maybe the industry doesn't want that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people starting off as screenwriters think that that's what's going to happen. I'm going to write my idea, someone will love it, and they'll make it exactly as is. That almost never happens. And this is why I think for me, working as an editor for 15 years was such a useful job, because I was a little bit emotionally detached from the stories, but I could see creatively how much you have to go through to get something to work. And so I think when I came in as a writer, like, I've had a lot of producers tell me, you're really great about collaboration, because I think I've seen how nascent these things are. Like, a screenplay is just a blueprint for a house or whatever. When you actually build the house, you realize, oh, I got to put pipes in. I can't run the pipes this way. We thought that paint color would be great, but it doesn't work with the trees outside. And actually the people moving in want to live in a different room. So there's so many things when it's very easy to look at the blueprints of a house and say, this is going to be a beautiful, perfect house. But then when you actually make it, you have to deal with reality. And so that, I think, is a great lesson for any screenwriter, is to go through that process. Even if you're doing it yourself, you're going to run into that. The person you cast is going to suddenly be a very specific version of that character. Maybe not the version you thought, but you now have to deal with that. And then how you edit it is also another big thing, and the music you put on it, all those elements.
Right, and I think we've been also maybe spoiled by, you know, the story of Swingers or Brothers McMullen, and we think, okay, I'll be the next one to do that. And that's not to dash people's hopes, but oftentimes that's not, those are like extreme stories.
Yeah. It's rare to have that happen. And lightning in a bottle, really. And the filmmakers themselves say that. You know, like, you listen to Jon Favreau talk, and they had, what, $1 million? Like under $2 million, I think, to shoot Swingers. So it's like they didn't have the money to do anything. I think it was just a combination of elements coming together in the right way. We're seeing it just now with Obsession. Obsession was $750,000, but because it's a horror movie, because they kind of knew the story they wanted to tell, they were able to kind of make it work, and then it connected with audiences. But that, to me, is like, you can't predict that's going to happen. So I think the biggest thing people can do is to really try and think hard about, why did they want to tell this story? Why was it important to them? And that's the thing to hang on to more than anything else. You don't even, frankly, have to tell anybody else. Sometimes I found when I tell producers, like, this is what I think this story is about, they don't want to hear that. But for you, I think as the creator, I think that's very important. To know, why does this need to exist? What is this saying that nothing else is really said in this exact same way? And if you can't think of that, maybe it needs a little bit more time in the oven. Maybe you need to think a little bit about more why you told it in the first place.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.